Good evening. I am Lacy Rice Jr. of the Greater Hardin County Women's Network, welcoming you to the 2022 Hardin County Political Candidates Forum Series, co-sponsored by the Greater Hardin County Women's Network and the Hardin County branch of the NAACP. Today, the candidate is running for District 2 Supreme Court Judge or Justice. Joining us is Justice Kelly Thompson. Today's format will be a 2-minute opening statement followed by 10 questions. He will have 2 minutes to answer each question. And to conclude, he will have 2 minutes to summarize. Today's timekeeper is Lenora Young, representing the Hardin County branch of the NAACP. At this time, we will open the floor to Justice Thompson for his opening statement.
Okay, well, first, Lacy, thank you for having me here. But secondly, I'm not a justice yet. That's what I'm running for. I'm a judge. I've been your judge in Hardin County for 16 years. I've been elected for 16 years. The last election, I carried every precinct in Hardin County. I carried 79% of the vote in Hardin County. In this election, I've been a judge for 16 years. I've written opinions. I've got a very active law practice prior to that. I was in the Supreme Court of the United States. I won cases in the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. I won cases in the Kentucky Supreme Court, the Kentucky Court of Appeals. My opponent has never been a judge, has never written an opinion, has never run for office. I believe I have the experience necessary. The Supreme Court of Kentucky is no place for on-the-job training. And that's what we have here. We have an attorney with a license who has never been in office, who has never been a judge, who now wants to be on the Supreme Court of the United States. It'd be like if I wanted to run for president next year or 2 years from now. It's quite a jump, quite ambitious. Anyway, I had a robust career prior to my activity after being elected as judge. I started out, graduated from Western Kentucky University, from University of Kentucky, and I'll tell you some more later. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Judge Thompson. And I do apologize for jumping the gun on calling you Justice.
All right.
The first question, you will have 3 minutes to answer. Could you please describe more of your judicial or legal experience in depth?
Well, that's easy. I can just keep on where I was. I went to Western Kentucky University. I went to the University of Kentucky. When I got out of the University of Kentucky Law School, my first job was as a lawyer for the Department of Transportation. And after 6 months, they made me the chief lawyer in Elizabethtown, Kentucky, where I tried trials. I tried condemnation trials that had been backed up and were sitting there for years. I tried about 60, 70 trials my first year out of law school. Then I got a call from Judge John Palmore, who later became Chief Justice of our first Supreme Court. Judge Palmore asked me to come to Frankfort to work for the then Court of Appeals, the highest court in the state. I did that for a year. During that year, we worked hard on the new judicial amendment, which has provided independence to our judiciary. After that, I came back to Bowling Green, Kentucky, where I got the contract as the chief public defender for Warren County, where I did that work for 23 years. I represented defendants who could not afford a lawyer. I gave them the maximum representation a man could get, or a woman, and tried hundreds of jury trials, had many not guilties for innocent people. I have the respect of a lot of people in Bowling Green for their passionate and zealous reputation as a lawyer who would defend poor people to the maximum. I never sloughed a case. So after that, I became a trial lawyer. I took on insurance companies. I took on pharmaceutical companies. I also was on national TV several times, made the Wall Street Journal, have had many big cases, and then I ran for judge, got elected in 16 years ago, and you all have elected me ever since.
Thank you. Please describe the duties of a Supreme Court justice.
Well, I'm hoping to get there. I'm not a Supreme Court justice yet. I think the duties of the Supreme Court justice will be to use common sense, civility in your decisions. What happens is you have 7 justices. They sit around a table. They talk about everybody's cases. Now, 99.9% of the cases have nothing to do with politics. They have to do with grinded out dispute resolution between citizens in our state. And I don't think you want to have any of these judges in the pocket of anybody. And as I've told you, there's a lot of dark money coming in here on my opponent's side. And apparently they think they're going to control the decisions made from that side. Now, after the common sense, and you have to use legal precedent, and you have to follow the statute. You can't write law. Justices can't write law. I've not been able to write law. I have never declared a statute unconstitutional to my knowledge. I have never written a law. In fact, I just had a case with Bernheim Forest where they were putting a pipeline through it. And all these people wanted me to create some rules that aren't in the books. And I said, I can't legislate from the bench. I have to follow what the legislature's done. And for some reason, the legislature required notice if they put a cell line over you, but they don't require notice if a gas line comes through your yard. You don't have to know about it. Thank you.
Thank you. What is the most important challenge facing the Kentucky Supreme Court?
Well, the most important challenge facing our entire judiciary is dark money. Money that comes in anonymously from out of state. This is a postcard for my opponent. Looks like she sent it out. But if you read the address on it, it's by a phony PAC that was created a week or 2 before the mailing. The address is a postal drop in Virginia. This cost more than my entire budget. And it's mailed to everybody in my district. And it's dark money. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know anything about it. And they don't mind if they lie. They don't mind anything. And these people, whoever they are trying to take over our court system and take away the independence of our judiciary and to own our judges. It's terrible.
Thank you. What are your views on civil rights violations, and what tools might you use to rule on penalties or judgments?
Penalties for judges are pretty harsh already if it's the Judicial Conduct Commission. The Judicial Conduct Commission has more powers than a court would have against a defendant in a jury trial. And they are very rigorous, and they monitor our judges when the complaints come in against judges. The civil rights aspect of your question, I represented many, many minorities. and I utilized and defended civil rights extensively when I was a public defender. And I still, one of my number one premises is the freedom of our individual rights to be fairly treated without discrimination and without any conduct which is in violation. I've ruled against the Louisville Police Department on 2 occasions on their open records when they don't give the records of how they ended up doing something. They stonewall, and I have written 2 opinions, another one on the University of Kentucky for failure to disclose records. I'm a big believer in individual personal rights.
Thank you. What place does your political ideology have in courtroom procedures or rulings?
Personal ideology does not have any place in a courtroom. Everybody has to be treated fairly. And I'm a I don't have much partisanship anymore. I've been a judge for 16 years, and it kind of makes you look at everything from a third party point of view. My personal feelings and I don't have much of it anymore. I'm just not an activist. I'm a middle of the road guy. And I just try to come up with fair decisions to adjudicate disputes between parties and to protect the rights of defendants, protect the rights of the Commonwealth. I've ruled every way you can name protecting the rights of people.
Thank you. Are you in favor for the death penalty in Kentucky?
I represented 5 death penalty cases. And against the statistics, I think only 2 of them were African American, 3 were Caucasian. But none of my defendants when I represented received a death penalty. They all received life. And, you know, the death penalty is so arbitrary. It's on the books. I can't change the law. I just can't. And the only people that can change that law is the legislature. And if they want to, they will. And if they don't, they don't. And there are certain crimes that probably are heinous enough to justify the death penalty. But unfortunately, you have one guy do the same thing as another guy. One of them might get death. One of them might get life. It's just arbitrary. Plus, it takes a lot of resources. When there's a death penalty case, the man, even if he's convicted, is going to stay on death row for over 10 years. And during that time, there's resources expended. He's kept in solitary. It costs more. I mean, it's just an expensive process. But I do believe that there's a difference between anarchy and civilization. And people that are acting like animals, or they have the mental capacity of animals, have to be segregated from our society. And I still think the death penalty, it's not my business. I gotta follow the law.
Thank you. What are your views on law enforcement misconduct cases, especially those that result in death or serious injuries?
Well, I've got one thing that I've written. I can't promise you what I'll do in the future, but having written over 1,000 opinions, you can find out my positions. My opponent never wrote an opinion. You don't know who, what you're getting. But one of my thing on law enforcement is, I guess this is a little off track, is high-speed chases. I believe that every police department must have a policy about high-speed chases. There should be no chase unless it's a felony. If you know who the defendant is, you shouldn't chase him. You go arrest him tomorrow at his house. High-speed chases cause a lot of deaths. cause a lot of injuries. 40% of them, third parties who are innocent, get hurt in a high-speed police chase. And people going after kids because their license is expired and they run and they get in a high-speed chase and kill people, that's wrong. Now, for a long time, that they had immunity. And I wrote a dissent which caused the Supreme Court to rule that there was not immunity if it gets so egregious in a high-speed chase. I'm hoping that will limit this, and I'd like cities to have a policy for it. As to misconduct by police officers, that's more of a thing that's more of a situation that occurs or is rectified through internal procedures or through a new law.
Thank you. What are your views on the separation of powers? And should one branch create laws or policies to make itself more powerful than the others, or restrict the powers granted by the Constitution?
Well, another thing that I watch for, and I've demonstrated in my opinions, is I'm beginning to believe we have four branches of government. We have the executive branch, we have the legislative branch, we have the judicial branch, and the new branch is the bureaucracy. Bureaucrats are pushing people around. It might be the health inspector, might be the building code inspector, might be the code enforcement inspector. And all of these people have very few checks and balances. And they are pushing people around and taking advantage of their rights. Now, I believe strongly in the separation of powers, strongly. And that's why I'm so scared of the influence of dark money trying to buy our court system. Because when it comes, it might be the legislative branch in coordination with the legislative branch. I think a lot of this dark money is a conspiracy to get around campaign finance reporting laws. So that's my answer.
Thank you. Are there instances when justices or a justice should rebuke an attorney or lower level judge?
I think we have a procedure for that with the Kentucky Bar Association disciplinary system, the Judicial Conduct Commission disciplinary system, and all we do as judges is point it out and refer someone, and that's an extreme. I believe in sanctions on lawyers. I don't believe in dismissing cases because a lawyer screwed up. I believe in punishing the lawyer with graduated fines for screwing up and leaving the case in the courts to decide on its merits. And so I really don't think the court system as itself. Now, as to the Supreme Court, after a lawyer goes all the way through the process, after a judge goes through the process of the internal disciplinary procedures, it is appealed to the Supreme Court and they make the final decision. But that's when we have our chance to say yes or no to the conduct that you're asking about.
Thank you. What are your views on term limits for judicial selections by election or appointments?
I go to seminars all 3 or 4 times a year, and I'm with judges and justices and federal court judges from all over the country. And there are states that have term limits, and it might be 70 years old. When you're 70 years old, you have to retire. There are states like that. And it's such a shame because I meet some brilliant judges who are going to retire next year because they're about to turn 70. As to the legislative branch, the term limits sounds like a good idea. But if you exercise term limits and you don't have some old politicians around in the Congress or in the state legislature, the bureaucrats are going to take over because they don't have term limits. And you'll have, in Washington, you have a G18. That's the highest bureaucrat there is. And if they've been there 40 years, they're going to end up with more power than a congressman that has to retire after 6 years or 12 years. Now, 8-year terms is what I'm running for. They have 2-year terms, 4-year terms, so that they continually come up with to the voters. But one thing I think we ought to have is sunset laws. When a law is passed, it ought to have a sunset date. 20 years from now, 25 years from now, it has to come back and be passed again or it expires.
Thank you. And that wraps up our question and answer portion. So at this time, Judge, can you please give us a summary?
A summary. All right. I'm like an employee asking an employer to keep my job. I have a young, inexperienced person who has applied for this job. You as an employer are the voters. And as an employer, if you make this decision based on our resumes, you will vote for me because I have the experience. I've already worked for you for the last 16 years as your judge. I've written 1,000 opinions. You ask your lawyer who to vote for. Who would they recommend that they would like you to have your case in front of if you go to court? And think about it from your own self-interest. Do you want somebody that you know who they are, they've already worked for you, they've got a good reputation, or do you want someone that is inexperienced and brand new to take that job? Thank you so much for letting me come to you, and thank you for your work, Lenora.
Thank you, Judge Thompson. And we thank him for participating. The opponent was contacted but never responded. We ask that you, the voter,
to the last 3 nights. I've been to 3 events and I can't find her. I'd like to.
Okay. Well, we ask that you, the voter, consider what Judge Thompson said today before making a decision. Do not vote simply because you know someone or because someone else refers the candidate to you. Use the information presented to make an informed choice. Thank you, the voters. And on behalf of the Greater Hardin County Women's Network and the Hardin County branch of the NAACP, have a blessed weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.